Let's look at 10 common mistakes AI makes in translation, coming up. Hello and welcome back to the Freelanceverse. Thanks for coming back to the channel once again. Thanks for the support on the recent uploads. I really appreciate it. Today I want to talk to you about certain flaws of machine translation. I'm going to title it AI translation probably just because it's the hype word at the moment. But to be honest, I said that many times on the channel, not much has changed for translation professionals when it comes to AI, MT. Specified tools for translation are still outperforming LLMs, for example, in terms of a translation. So it still makes sense to speak of it as MT, as neural machine translation. Over the last couple of weeks, I wrote down a few things that I've seen here and there. I don't work too much with AI output, but when I've seen it also just out in the wild, I feel like I'm quite good in spotting AI-generated copywriting, unfortunately. That's one of the points, actually. So I came up with 10, I think I have 10 mistakes that people need to look out for. And also, they're not only mistakes, they're also opportunities where we as humans can excel and where we can outperform the machine, right? So these are things you need to focus on when you work on your own craft, on your own expertise. The first error category I'm calling technically correct, but totally wrong. What I mean by that is there are a lot of word-for-word literal translations when you use AI tools. All of the AI data is gathered by already existing data online, whether it's written by humans or whether it's already now. I mean, people say now already half of the content that is published online is LLM generated. So that means the tools are now learning from each other, from the tools. So a lot of the content is just going to be word for word and literal, right? So a few examples in German that I come across all the time. In English, you very often say, let's see the next step. Let's see what comes next, right? And I see that all the time translated literally in German as lass uns sehen, lasst uns sehen. While it kind of became correct, it became normal because it's often translated like that, right? But naturally, that is not something that comes to you when you're a German speaker. You wouldn't say "Lass uns sehen, was als nächstes kommt." You would word that slightly differently. So very often I have to rewrite things like that. The same with shall we proceed. Usually you would just say, okay, moving on to the next step in German. Something like that, much more direct instead of the rhetorical question that often is asked in English. And these things are very often just translated literally. So word-for-word translations are a huge point of contention in AI translation that you need to look out for. And I feel like they're especially insidious because in post-editing, often you have the instruction to only correct obvious major errors. And this is not a major error, right? This is a stylistic change. But you would not write that if you actually translated it from scratch as a human. So you would leave it in, and then it becomes public knowledge and it feeds the other LLMs. So that's the cycle where the language just gets dumped down by this new generation of tools. Next error category I call idioms for idiots. Idioms have always been tricky for machines to translate. A few things that came up recently. We have an expression in German, it's called das Gelbe vom Ei, the yellow from the egg. And it means in kind of a condescending, sarcastic way sometimes, it means the best solution, the best of the best. And if you translate that as the yellow from the egg, that's obviously not an idiom in English, and that would make English speakers feel very funny probably. But not only that, I've seen it time and time again from English as well, translated into German directly. And same as I mentioned before, some of these idioms became so custom in German to directly translate. For example, I see your point is so often used that in German now people say, ich sehe deinen Punkt, like a literal translation. That is not German, but it's just being used nowadays. And so there is also a kind of philosophical question whether you should leave that in and because people actually use it, or whether you should actually write proper German. Anyways, idioms are tricky. Next error category I called tone deafness. The tone is a major issue for automatic translation and copywriting. They're better in reading context nowadays, but the tone still depends so much, not only on the context, but also on the briefing that you get from the client, right? What is the audience like? Who is actually reading that? Is it an uplifting article or is it a financial report that needs to be in a completely neutral tone? As it happens so often that just recently I did a post editing job for a company that it was marketing material and a product that is targeted at young people but not underaged, right? It's very important that it's the audience is like 20 to 26 year olds. And some of the tone was absolutely off, and it switched as well. It went from way too formal to way too like underage demographic. So I had to switch up a lot in that post editing, and I told the client that this is way too much work. I mean, I always charge it by the hour post editing, so it doesn't really matter to me how much work it is because I just get paid as long as it takes. But I still told them that it will take much more time than they actually think, and they said, okay, yeah, if that's the case, then go for it. In the end, it was almost the same price as a proper translation, and that's always good to tell the client these things, because if it's a direct client, they might not know it, and if it's an agency, it might open their eyes to the fact that they need to be more careful when they send a quote to the end client. Similarly to tone deafness, the next one is called the formality effect. The form of address is something that doesn't exist in English, right? They're not different, the form of address, whereas in most, I don't know if in most other languages, but definitely in many languages that I know and heard of, the formal and informal address are different. And an automatic translation would never ask you whether you want formal or informal, right? And that's actually something that translators always ask their clients. If it's not clear or if it's not in the briefing, that's something you need to know. How do you want to address your customers? How do you want to address your readers? And based on the formality, in German it's du versus sie. So there are two forms of you, but one is formal, one is informal. And that also affects the other text, right? The tone, the register becomes different when you address a reader with C. And then there are even certain instances where you would want it still to be casual, and you maybe still talk to the reader on a first name basis, but you still use C. That often happens in university context, for example. So there are a lot of things to consider in the formality effect that is usually just overlooked and just made a decision by the AI system. Technological tools are accidentally gender blind. That is something that, similar to the formality effect, doesn't really affect English that much because there's no genders. So whenever you have something like the athletes or the professors or the doctors, it would just use the masculine form of the plural, which you can't really do nowadays, right? Very often clients want a gendered approach, whether it being with the gender star, so you put the star and you put not only male and female, but you use a system that includes everything in between as well. And that's something you would have to prompt, obviously, to do if you want to do that. But if you just use a NMT, a neural machine translation, it will give you either a gendered approach, but most likely if it does gender, then it's a binary approach and it uses the male and the female version, or it doesn't gender at all and it uses the masculine version. It's very rare that it actually gives you a gender neutral version. So tools are gender blind, but accidentally and not really beneficially. Next error category I call the uncanny valley. If you're familiar with the uncanny valley phenomenon, that's a phenomenon that comes from humanoid, from robots, and from CGI characters, from gaming, for example. The more a character or a robot gets to what a human would look like in real life, the more weird it gets for us humans to look at. And there is a certain fear that comes with that, right? The closer it gets to us, the more you feel like, no, I don't want that. And that's a big discussion also in gaming nowadays, because there is just a new engine released that puts an LLM filter over a game if you want to, and it improves the realistic effect of the characters by a lot, and they look much more like a photorealistic version of a human. But a lot of gamers don't want that, right? Or a lot of animation fans don't want that. That's not why they are actually appreciating the art, and it also just eliminates artists in general. That's another discussion. And the same you have with language very often, right? It becomes uncanny, it becomes too polished, too professional. It has the same sentence structure, the same orthography, the same wordings all the time. And then sometimes you get an email from someone you clearly know that let's say their English they speak well English, but it's not that sophisticated. And then their emails are just perfect. Too perfect, not perfect, too perfect. And that becomes uncanny. And okay, this is all just LLM generated BS. That is half of the words you don't need. Get to the point. So many presentations nowadays I see that are clearly AI generated. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it gets worse and worse, because as I said, the content that is now published online, almost the majority already is LLM generated. So it learns by this metric and it thinks this is the way to go. But this is not what humans actually sound like and speak like. Next error category, the clueless confidence. LLMs will always give you answers with 100% certainty, even though they are not certain. And that's something you have to be really careful about. And then if you call them out and you say, this is actually not true, what are you saying? Oh yeah, of course, you're very right. This is actually not true. Sorry about that. So the first inclination will always be, this is correct. This is confidence. I'm confident about that. That's why, I try to use LLMs as little as possible. And if I do, I use the Le Chat from Mistral to have at least European data protection guaranteed. But even there, it's designed to please you, right? It will always make you sound like the smartest human alive. And that is something that is tricky, because you're obviously going there with little confidence. So you need someone with authority and confidence to tell you what you want to hear. And that can be dangerous with this clueless confidence. So you always need to verify the results. And if you prompt it, you can also do that. You can say, please don't be sycophantic. Please don't want to please me at any cost. Just be factual. Give me resources for everything you say so I can double check them privately as well. So how you prompt also matters a lot. Next error category I called ADMA. Acronyms don't matter anyways. Acronyms are really tricky for LLMs, often NMTs as well. Very often they just get taken as they are and put into the target language as well. When I do post editing, the acronyms are almost always identical to the source. So there is always an additional research step to do, because most likely this acronym means something that either needs to be translated, either has an acronym that is already existent in the target language, either needs a rewriting, and then in brackets the acronym in the source language plus the acronym itself as well. There are many different approaches you can go with acronyms, but just using it as is from the source is very dangerous and very confusing for the reader. Next error category, uncultured robot. Cultural knowledge is what we can convince our clients with. It very often happens that something is just not right. It just doesn't sound right. I just today had a conversation with a client. It was a whole campaign about Father's Day for a Swiss company, for a company that also sells in Switzerland. And I told them, look, I find it, you can do that. Of course, there is an official Father's Day on the 7th of June, but if I got a notification, and I've never celebrated Father's Day in my life. I wouldn't have even known when it is if I didn't look it up. And if I then get a notification to celebrate Father's Day with this company, I would feel a bit weirded out at first. That would be a bit odd for me, right? So I told them, maybe rethink this structure. Like Mother's Day is very much celebrated in Switzerland, Father's Day isn't. If you want to create a whole campaign, maybe it's worth to do it for Mother's Day rather than Father's Day, because people don't really celebrate it. Maybe families with a migration background celebrate it more. So there is still, and there are many families like that. So there is still benefit to having this campaign, but at least think about it. So this kind of cultural knowledge that we can give to our clients is invaluable and has nothing to do with word-for-word translation, but is actually consultancy work. And the last error category I called terminology. Terminology is the enemy of an LLM. Companies often have glossaries, have term bases, have translation memories, have briefings, have blacklisted terms, for example. For a tool to actually use all this would all have to be fed to it as resources, right? And that, first of all, that very rarely happens. And even if it happens with a cut tool implementation, I've seen it before, it rarely works out well. Like so many times, official terminology from a company is not used correctly. Program names, tier names of a reward system is just something that comes to mind that I recently worked on, have been translated all over the place, sometimes left in English, sometimes translated, sometimes half translated, not consistent at all. So inconsistencies are huge in automatic translation. That's something that, we work with cut tools exactly for that reason, right? So you have to do one translation once and the rest is then consistent. And that doesn't happen at all when it's post-editing AI content. So it can be very frustrating too. And sometimes you can't even, control, you can't even search and replace it because it happens that it comes up in different cases. We have 4 cases in German, and if you just search and replace it in one case, it might come up in another case with a different ending, and then you miss it, right? So it can be tricky. Terminology is a big enemy of automatic translation tools, and a big friend of us professional translators who work with it, who can actually use terminology to our advantage. There you go, 10 common AI flaws, AI errors that come up in translation. Make sure you are on top of all of these. You are just creating your craft, creating your selling point with these in mind, so you can actually convince the client that your services are worth it. Your services offer more than the general AI slop that we will see in the next few years, because everything will just be mediocre, and that's where we can be exceptional. I hope this makes sense. Make sure to tune in next Monday for our next video, and take care. Bye bye.